Hi everybody, we're back. I'm Brian.
I'm still Aaron.
And we're still here again. But this time, we have the exciting demo that we're coming to you live from Redmond, HA and DR. So let's go ahead and kick this off.
So we're going to show off what's on my machine here. You'll see that I've got a voice call going here. Holly, our beautiful assistant here, she's been having this 2-hour conversation with her boss, John.
Wow, with her boss. That's a long conversation.
She's getting,
not going well.
She's getting chewed out. It's a sad day. It's a sad day. But from an HA perspective, what we can see is, in fact, Holly is signed in primarily. Her primary pool registrar is FE2, right? In order, she prefers FE2 and then FE01. That was just what happened when she signed in. And John, who's our other user over here, he's in the same scenario, right? So his...
Larger type.
Oh, sorry about that.
Let's get larger type. Yes. Yay. Okay. And we get the thumbs up. Studio loves us.
Yay! So what you can see here is I've got this nifty little commandlet called get-cs user pool info, and I target a user who I want to return information about. And you'll see that I return stuff for about Holly. I can tell she's on red pool. She doesn't have a backup pool because I haven't defined a paired pool. You can see that then her user services FQDN is that same red pool. And then it gives me a little more info in here about who her primary and backup are, where she would get user services and backup. And you can see that if you compare this to the 2010 version of the same commandlet, a lot more information shows up. In 2010, we didn't back up user services. We only backed up registration. Right? So when you failed over, you didn't get any of that other stuff.
You were in that limited mode, and that's what you got. But again, phones were up.
Agreed. Yeah. But the other piece is because each front end contains that copy of that data, we need to know who is the primary and secondary for that copy of your user data, not just your ability to register.
Right.
So we were talking about that black box about how your users are distributed and where their first and second and third copies are. And this is a way to see that data. But again, there's no set-cs user pool info.
In fact, if you have 3, 4, 5 servers in the pool and her primary and secondary go down, the logic refigures out where she could be. When her primary and secondary come back up, there's a good chance she won't necessarily be re-registered out. 2010, you always were set on a pool.
And the other thing is, a little while ago, I stopped the services on this front-end pool 01. It reshuffled her.
Exactly.
She's now primary on 2. So I'm not going to see anything when I fail her over. If I stop services on FE01, I'm not going to cause any outage in that call.
Because she's not on FE01.
Right, she's not signed in. And actually, if I can very quickly show that in the configuration information, you can see that right here I'm connected to FE02. That's my connected server.
And her boss is on FE02 as well? Mm-hmm. Right, so we can lose a whole pool and those two people would not even be affected.
I can lose that server, that front end. I can just come in here, action, and stop some services. I want to go into it because I don't feel like stopping all of them. But if I simply stop that user service, it's going to stop the user and the registrar service.
Right, because without registration, we can't be associated to a pool.
And I come here, my call is up, everything's happy, nobody's having a problem.
Now what happens if we have FE01 up and running fully, and we stop registration services on FE02, where both users are currently talking?
So let me get that back up and running, and I'll show you. What's in fact going to happen is because these users are on the same network or had some other type of client-to-client connectivity, their voice calls would persist, but they would go into a limited functionality mode until their user and registration services failed over to the other server in that pool
and then come right
within
back
about
online.
5 minutes.
Right. So we don't necessarily drop a call. That's also true if we have a mediation server that is outside of the pool, so a standard pool, and a call is going PSTN. we can in fact maintain that PSTN call with the pool going down because the call and the media is flowing between the user and the mediation server,
Exactly.
not the PSTN media bypass could potentially, to some extent, we're going to lose the SIP signaling, and eventually that's not going to be good.
You might lose call control.
But media should continue to flow. Right.
But your ability to interact with and potentially hang up that call, you may not be able to mute the call, things like that, but you can definitely continue the call. So at this point, I've brought up that FEO1, everything's kosher, everybody's happy. I go into FEO2 and I perform that same action, and I stop the registrar and I stop the user service.
Okay.
Right?
So we go to the client. Call's still up. We just got signed up because the pool we were registered to just went down.
Yep.
From our perspective.
From our perspective, we aren't talking to that pool anymore. And if I run that same command here again for Holly, it's going to go out and reach out and find that data in the database. It's going to find first in the database who I'm talking to, and you'll see it dynamically rebalanced since pool 2 or since FEO2 isn't even online in this scenario anymore. It removes it.
Right.
The user services and the registration services of that server are just gone.
Now, again, a significant change from 2010 when you were statically set in a specific order to a pool. So as you recall, let's say I have 3 servers in
and
the
I
pool.
come back here.
And you're
and
back.
Holly's back. 30 seconds at most.
Right.
Holly's back. She's signed in. She has presence. She has her full contact list. Everything's kosher.
Right. So think about 2010. We had 3 servers in the pool, and we remember that we were associated a priority to the node in the pool, and that priority may be 1, 3, 2, let's just say.
And it happened at the time when I was Lync enabled.
Right. As
and
soon as
never
you were
changed.
created, it was a set.
Yep.
Okay. Then we took 1 down for service, and so I flipped to 3 because that was the next to my order. And then I took 3 down, so I flipped to 2. Well, 3 came back up first. Well, 3 has a higher priority than 2, so I just flipped and went back to 3. 1 finally comes out, I log out, log back in, come to 1. It could be a very cumbersome process. With the new world, there is a possibility you do get shuffled to a completely different server because that's just how the fabric's deciding. But there's also a high chance you won't be. So when you end up landing on a pool, or front end, you're done for that particular session. And so in this case, even though we've booted FEO1 and FEO1 comes back online, or FEO2 gets booted and FEO2 comes back online, we don't get logged out and logged back in unless we need to redistribute users, which can happen because everybody's on 1, nobody's on 2. We may need to load balance it. Just the user count's wrong, and we want to keep that. So partial amount of users may get logged out.
Yep.
But completely different from it's going to happen multiple times, people in and out, versus it may happen. So.
Yep. And I don't need to watch this, but here it's come back. I run these same commands against Holly, and I now will see that she is going to be primary on 1 and secondary on 2, because that's the order it came up in.
Right.
So at that, that's the high availability story, right?
Right. So slightly different than 2010.
A little different than 2010, but actually a better user experience. Because I drop into that limited functionality mode, but then when I come back fairly quickly, I come back and I've got everything back for myself, and it's 15, 20, 30 seconds even in my lab.
Right. Okay.
With that, we're going to switch over to Brian, and he's going to show us a little bit about disaster recovery.
Woohoo, DR. So the DR is, again, we talked about just recently, is the concept of having a paired pool. So what we're going to show in this lab is, or the demo, is the concept of how we configure this, how do we set up the paired pool, and then we're going to switch to my cooking show cutter super special demo and flip to another world that's already had it set up, because it does take a little time for this to happen. One big thing to point out when we're setting up DR, do not rush this process of setting it up. If you get ahead of yourself and try to just force it and get things to happen, which, speaking from experience, have done, when we go to flip things, they're not ready to be flipped yet because they haven't all acclimated themselves to the environment.
Data hasn't replicated, maybe your CMS isn't moved.
But we'll show some commands to show that they have been done in our new world and that they haven't been done in our existing world. So, looking at our lab, we have here the Topology Builder. This is, like everything else we see here, one thing that we want to point out initially, because it's in a normal topology state, is that we have red pool is our CMS pool. So as expected, we have a server that is running our CMS. When we expand and get to our enterprise pool, red pool, we'll also notice in Roam we have a pool called Roam pool. So we have two pools, two different sites, completely different. Do they have to be in a separate site? No, to pair. Can they pair with more than one server? No. It's a one-to-one pair pooling.
We used to have in Lync 2010, we had this idea of a primary and a backup registrar, and you didn't have to have that one-to-one relationship. So it's a little bit of a change for us here in 2013. I am the backup to you, and you are the backup to me.
That's right.
In a 3 data center scenario, you can't have one pool in one data center, one pool in each of those 3 data centers, and have everybody be taken care of.
That's right. Keep in mind that when we enable this pool pairing in 2013, we don't have the option to only do voice pool pairing. It is all or nothing. And so conceptually, to have a server or site that could take on 2 other servers with all its users and data is unlikely and not possible anyway. So we will say, these are enterprise pools, we can do the exact same configuration in a standard edition pool. So while you may not have high availability in a standard edition, if standard edition is where you want to go, you can set up this disaster recovery scenario and configuration between 2 standard edition servers. You can also technically set up a standard edition to an enterprise as a backup.
Completely not supported.
100% unsupported.
Yeah, that is
technically it can be configured that way. You just don't do it.
The topology builder won't prevent you from doing it.
Right.
But when you're backing it up and creating that relationship, you've got to know what you're doing, and you recognize that should that fail over and things don't work the way you expect them, PSS is going to have a problem.
Yeah. So we're going to go into the properties of our Redmond pool, and in this particular pool we are going to go and configure resiliency. Again, it's not a lot of options here. It's enable it and which pool is going to be our backup. And the other side, the flip, in this case it'll be Roam, will automatically be set the same way, and we can't have it set any other way. It's one-to-one and it's how it's configured. So we're going to initiate the configuration and say I have the Roam pool. Now if you had multiple pools that had not been configured for resiliency, they'd all be listed there. Because we only have one, that's what it is. Now if we don't want voice to be part of this, we can say don't, but we can't do it the other way around. We can't have voice be a part of resiliency and not have data be a part of resiliency or the backup service. So we're going to initiate automatic failover of voice 2, and for demo purposes, we'll set this to 3030. We won't actually see this, but that's what we always set it to in demo. And to show that it's going to reflect on the Roam side, we want to set that. Now, as soon as I hit OK, the Topology Builder is going to reflect a couple things. One, Roam will have the same configuration. And when we look, slowly but surely, we can see its associated backup pool is, in fact, the Redmond pool. And again, it's a 3030. So it's not something that's configured one side or the other. If I make a change in Roam for resiliency, as this comes up, and I decide I want this to be 300, and 300. Again, red pool is who I'm with. I hit OK. When I come look at red pool, it's set to 300. So it's more than one setting. Whatever you're configured as your opposite side or your backup, your mirror, it's mirroring your settings there. It's going to create the configuration. You'll also notice that, as you recall, when we first came in, we only had one CMS server. Now we have 2. We have 2 potential boxes that would be a central management server. Redmond pool is the active one. That's who we're talking to. But you'll notice that there's the second one, Roam pool, could be, in theory, a CMS. So that's cool. How does that work? Well, when we publish this, we're going to see that it wants to add additional databases to SQL 03, who is the SQL backend to Roam. If we look on SQL 01 at our current database structure, let's refresh this, make sure he's accurate, and he is. He's got his normal databases, and in addition, you'll notice XDS and LIS. That's because he's the CMS. Otherwise, the databases are what any backend server would have. If we go to SQL 03, and again refresh, we'll notice the only 2 databases that aren't the same as SQL 01 is exactly that, XDS and LIS. And that's because he's never been a CMS. However, now that we have the ability to be a CMS because he's a backup registrar and who he's backing up is the CMS, we're going to build those databases. It's also important, if we were doing this to different pools and they didn't have the CMS on them, they wouldn't install the CMS databases there. This is only because his backup is the CMS.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
And this is only happening because it's an enterprise pool with an enterprise backend. That's why we have to manually now do that work to get those CMS databases back on that backup pool.
Right. So let's go ahead and publish this database. And when we publish it, we're going to get the notification that we're going to be talking to SQL 03. And again, that's making our CMS stuff. So there it is, saying, hey, we've got to do some other database creations. And we're like, ready to go. Let it happen. And off we go. And again, this publishing process does a couple of things. It tells the server that it has additional components to install. And if you don't do this part, things do not work. And they can trip you up for a good 30 minutes, 45 minutes during an exam because you forget because you're rushing. Hate that. So,
no, that would never happen to you.
Never. So when you're working on this, make sure that you're going step by step. You know what's the funny thing is Lync will tell you when there's stuff you have to do. Don't ignore it. Don't get so flustered and sidestepped and getting going and speeding through processes that you forget to look at things. But one of the things we have to do is install stuff. So if you think about...
If you take a look here, it's got a little to-do list for us.
I know, it does tell us this. Remember, if we're thinking outside the box of what we have to do, one, Rome's box, LFE03, never had the file transfer service on it. It's got to add that because it could potentially be the master of the organization.
Yep.
We also don't have on any of the servers the replication service. That's got to be there so that we can actually push replication out. If we were to actually go and click the to-do list, it would tell us exactly that. Hey, don't forget to run setup on FE01, 2, and 3. And then, hey, once you've done that, don't forget to invoke backup. Because if you don't, none of this is going to work. And from a viewing perspective, if this comes up, yeah, and I think it's interesting because Lync does a very good job of trying to help you help yourself.
It's really nice. It's telling
you what to do.
Hey, I had these other things since you were running me I couldn't do myself. You need to now go take these actions. And since you're running Bootstrapper, you should know that because you've just defined this, it's entirely possible that you'll run Bootstrapper on these things and you may have to restart servers or services. You maybe not want to do this, say, at the busiest time you're having conference calls in your organization.
Yeah, the other thing, once we start this backup service, if there's a lot of data that's transferring, we're going to start this replication process. So just keep in mind, we're moving data to get this all in sync. Once we're in sync, then where delta changes are happening. But still, there could be a significant amount of data in a large organization. And we're going to start some of this just to show the process on one or two of these boxes and a couple of different ways that you could do it. So one of the ways is just like it said, go run, okay, come on, and there. Go ahead and run the deployment wizard. One thing we want to point out in the deployment wizard is from 2010 to 2013 it became intelligent from its green checkmark perspective. In 2010, in the session you were in, if you were going to run to add or remove components and you had just run it, it would have had a green check mark. If you left the deployment wizard and came back, it would be gone again because you could run it again. And in 2013, if you come back into the application, it will actually have the green check mark there if there's nothing to do. If there is no green check mark, that means there is something he's waiting to run.
It effectively means you need to run Bootstrapper.
Run it, right. And so there's two ways to do it. We can do it this way, which is the long way, which is loading the deployment wizard, bringing up the control panel, going in deploy, let it go and determine what's out there. Or, as that's running, we can change our directory. We'll wait for that to reconnect as we go back to this one. And bootstrap, just running the bootstrapper.exe component. Now the bootstrapper is effectively what we're running here, just outputting to a GUI. So as we run this process, and then hit next, there we go. It's going to go figure out what's different in the topology. Now, you'd also want to make sure that the CMS had replicated all of these servers. Otherwise, he wouldn't have realized that he needed to go ahead and get these things done. And there's various ways to do that, but the easiest is to git-cms central management store replica status, I think it is. Tab it out. But notice here, the backup service gets installed. That's what would be expected. If I'm on a box that I just want to do this from the Bootstrapper, and again, in my opinion, a much faster way to do things, I can change to the program files, well, wherever you install Lync 2013-2 to the deployment directory and just run Bootstrapper. And when I do so, it just starts the process. It doesn't evaluate the environment to let me know if I need to run it. You can run Bootstrapper all you want, over and over and over and over. If there's nothing to add or remove, it just goes through the process.
Right, and it is important to note, as we said before, whenever you're running Bootstrapper or the install or update wizard, it's going out and checking your local copy of the CMS. It's not pulling a copy. So if you run Bootstrapper before CMS has replicated, no changes are going to be made.
Right. But notice how quickly I was able to get to installing the backup service and getting things going, and all looks good and well. Now, don't forget that I just installed the service. That didn't start the service. So either I need to start it manually or just click the button if I'm in the deployment wizard. And again, say I'm waiting for deployment status to figure itself out. Very slow process. Or just run the process here and say start-cs Windows service, which is what we'll do right here. If it's not running, then it's not doing anything. And there's Lync backup starting up. On FEO1, we would just run the process because we're in the deployment wizard. And again, I'd have to do this on FEO3 as well. And he's going to not only get the backup service, but he's also going to get the file transfer management master option so that he could effectively become the master
when he has to be the CMS master.
Right. Yep. Okay. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get out. Oh, the other thing I wanted to show was in SQL 3, if we refresh this now, look, there's a copy of LIS and there's a copy of XDS because he now can potentially become the CMS. So he's ready to go. Yeah, replicated but not going. Now we're going to switch over to another instance of this configuration. And in this configuration, the idea will be to, this has already been set up and things are replicated and I've installed all the bits in all 3 boxes. Other than that, nothing else is really different. I've just validated that replication has happened and things are up and going.
All your data is replicated and you've now got that backup registrar relationship configured and functional.
That's right. So now I'm going to look and say, here is Holly. Holly's logged into client 03, and if I want to look and see what Holly's doing, we can see, okay, Holly's in the Redmond pool. We can validate that she is a Redmond pool user. Her location profile points her to Redmond. This is an important thing to notice. Location profiles dictate a lot of information, specifically about your LIS and how things phone and call and go, right?
And connected server?
And my connected servers is SIP.on-prem. It doesn't really show me anything in this.
But in this case, it meant she connected to something in the red pool. Red pool is where SIP resolves.
That's right. But we don't know which of the front ends. But we could go find out.
We don't know.
And this is an interesting thing because Lync Configuration Manager sometimes does show the server and sometimes it shows the pool name.
So what this means is when she connected to Lync pool, she returned 2 addresses. And back to our HA discussion, she returned 2 addresses. Of those 2, she randomly tried one. The one she randomly tried was the one that worked and told her she should be primary on it. So she didn't go back and check the other one via DNS.
So technically she did connect to SIP. She didn't connect exactly to a server name.
Yep.
All right. So the first thing we can do for Holly is we can get, like we were before, the CS user. Oh,
user pool info.
Let me blow this up.
Get-CS user pool info.
User pool info. Whoop, there. And we want Holly at
dash identity. Did you do?
I don't need identity because it's the first name. So one of the things about identity, as long as the first value you enter is the identity, it's assumed that is the identity if you don't put a dash in. Anyway, so Holly at, and is it on-prem
on-prem 123?
Of course it is. Dot
link biz or linkignite.biz.
Okay.
And if you have trouble specifically with CS user pool info, if you have trouble using SAM account names, it's pretty common. User pool info likes to go against SIP address.
And a lot of things like to go against SIP address. So if you try to do
SIP address is fairly universal. SAM account names and UPNs may be a little less universal in all the commands in Lync.
Okay, as we're waiting for this to come back, which will be any second now, I am sure of it, we will get the information of exactly what's happening in the environment and where people are at and not at. We're also going to see what is our current status. Now, again, this environment I already invoked, things ran. Come on. When this comes back, we will notice that on this one, there was a configuration and setup that ran, and everything worked as fine. So this we just left up from my original deployment to show that it was actually run. On FEO3, he's ready to do the failback. I just haven't got that far yet. We run the failback and the fail from the pools of where we're failing and failing to and from and back and things of that nature. The management server failover is an interesting beast. There is a CS management server failover command there is not a CS management server failback command.
It's always a failover.
It's always failing because
Wherever
it
you're
doesn't have
going.
a home per se.
Yep.
It's on one or the other, and it can happily live on one or the other. You know, if you're OCD and you want everything back to where it goes, well, then you'll fail it back.
But that's you being
Right,
OCD.
right. You don't have to. So we're going to see a couple of cool things
In
here.
this case, though, in the lab that we're dealing with, the CMS is originally hosted on the 2010 pool.
It was, and we went ahead and moved it off there and pushed it onto the world of 2013 so we could see the replication happen. Otherwise, all of this wouldn't work. So I'm not sure. Anyway, but we can see here that she is on the red pool and she has a backup pool. Unlike in the previous example where this wasn't configured, we didn't have any backups. So here we have Roam pool is our backup, and then we have FEO1, 2, and now 3 is the primary backup pool register. You also notice there's a backup pool user secondary register. If that was to be a second server or more in that secondary pool, you could potentially have 4 boxes that could potentially be listed as her machine.
6.
Well, 6 that are listed, but not displayed.
Sure,
But, yeah.
but you could have 6 boxes containing this user's data in a fully deployed, high availability with disaster recovery configuration.
Okay.
That's pretty impressive to have 6 copies of my data.
Plus the static
Plus
in the
the
CMS.
static in the
XDS
database.
So, okay. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to check the status to make sure that everything's up and functioning like we would expect. And we would be doing this if we wanted to make sure that we could actually fail over prior to failing over. So we're going to get the backup service pool status, and we're going to do this for the red pool .onprem.local. And we'll notice a couple of things. We're going to see FEO1 is the one that's managing. Again, only one box can manage the backup service. In this case, it happens to be
any
FEO1.
one time.
Right, per pool.
Yep.
We can see that the export status is final. He's done doing whatever he's doing. He's not initializing. He's not in the mode of doing anything. It's done. And we can see the import status, which means we have got other people's data, and it's normal. We're good to go. As far as we can tell, we've done what we're supposed to do, and we've received the data back that we're supposed to receive.
Yep.
We can also see that user services are in their final state and normal. Conferencing services and the CMS are all owned by this box. So that would indicate that this pool and his databases are all exactly where we expect them to be and in a final normal state as well.
Is that CMS master is in final state not initialized?
That's normal. That would tell us that the CMS is in his final state here. He hasn't been pushed over to reverse part. But we'll actually see that flip here in just a second. So we're backup service state of the pool that we're on, and we also want to do the same thing, and we'll just for sake purposes. And notice when I tab out on 3, I didn't erase my pipe and my FL. Awesome. Roam pool. Oops. I gotta get my fingers in the right place. Roam pool dot onprem.local. And when I pull his information, again, I see he is FEO3. That's the only box that's in the pool. But final state normal. And you'll notice the CMS is opposite. Not initialized, but in a normal state. So he's not the one active, but his replica is normal. So it's the exact opposite of what we're seeing. But everything else is good to go. But that's how we can tell where the CMS is actively living as well. Or Topology Builder is another way to do it. But we can get it from the backup state to see who is the normal state of the pools, who owns it. Okay. So we validated that the client has access. Over here, we're back to Holly. We can see her status is reflecting when we want it to reflect. Things are changing. If I D&D, it does flip. So in fact, we are able to talk to the pool and things are reflecting and dating. And because she's on FEO1, she's on the primary Redmond pool. Everything's good. Now, the first thing we have to do in any event, if the CMS lives on our database of what we're failing, and in this case, it lives on Redmond and it does in fact need to be moved, is we need to invoke the CS management server failover. Now, again, there is no failback. There's replication, but there's failover and that's it. And I don't need to specify anything because it's just saying go ahead and fail over the CMS. There's only one other place to go.
Yeah, find the other place you can live and go live there.
Now, it will tell you where it's at, and it also is going to tell you where it thinks it's going to put it. So you do have a visual check to say, is this what I'm expecting things to happen? It also saying, if this command is being run from a computer other than in Roam, be aware that when things happen, everything is not what you're going to think it be. The file transfer service has to be kicked up. Things have to start. Yeah. Okay. Happy.
When you fail over CMS, lots of changes happen in your environment that are behind the scenes. It shouldn't be user impactful to fail over the CMS, but it will be impactful to your administrators.
That's right. So as soon as I hit this, because I'm no longer able to communicate with my pool still thinks, because I failed this over, my local copy that I am still homed my CMS on himself, and it's not. So it won't be until he's remotely told Roam Pool to shut this guy's FTA down, and we can see that in the event logs. And on the other side, that we're going to go ahead and be happy and go ahead and we're now owning the master service, and then replication happens and everything fits itself out. So in fact, before we start this, let's go ahead and refresh this so we see where we're at. Our normal errors are normal because we don't have whack deploy, that's fine. But we'll notice everything is normal here at the moment, and we're going to go ahead and say yes. And we're going to start this process. Now it goes through a list of things to validate that it can do this change prior to doing the change, and it's done it. And again, we get our warning because we're running it from the pool we're on. As we refresh, we're going to see that it's saying, hey, the backup service was going to do something and now we can't. Well, that's because the backup service was just told that he's no longer important. He is now not the master of things that are happening in life and go away. If we go to FEO3 and we look at his event logs, we'll notice that things are saying, hey, things are changing and things are in the normal state. So here we are connected. Things are going as we would expect. And in just a second, we'll notice that the file transfer agent just got kicked up and said, hey, we're now the CMS AD endpoint. Are we happy? And who are we connecting to? We're connecting to SQL 03. That's our new CMS. That's important because now the CMS box that is the CMS knows is the CMS. That's really important. Sometimes, if you rush this and you get ahead of this process and that doesn't happen, then one box thinks the other's the CMS, the other box thinks the other's the CMS, and nobody's doing anything. You can force it back, wait for replication to happen, and then do it again. But if you rush this process, things don't work. So again, you can see here the FTA service is now active on this box, and we can also see the backup service is now the active one on pool 2, the Roam pool. Back to pool 1, we can see that he's became inactive. The master service is now inactive. He's no longer the master, and we're reading from AD, and we see, oh, the CMS is SQL 03 here as well. So everything from a replication perspective has happened. We get things to go. We look at the client. The CMS, as Aaron alluded to, we don't care where the CMS is. From a client perspective, it makes no difference to me where CMS lives. I don't interact with it. I don't talk with it. It has no impact to me whatsoever. But the CMS has gone ahead and gone. And when we come to 03, we are going to attempt to not fail over. Oh, no. I thought I had this typed out. Oh, here it is. Invoke the CS pool failover, and we're going to invoke the pool failover of Redmond pool. So it's a simple command of invoke CS pool failover, and then which pool are we going to fail. Now we're going to see that this is going to fail, and it's expected to fail, even though you didn't know it was expected to fail. But the nice thing is, it doesn't do anything because it says I can't do anything. And the reason is we have an edge route that is owned by the default route for outbound communications on the pool. Now we could do a force if we can't update this because he's gone, that pool is destroyed or unavailable. Well, we could in fact fail over this pool. You can use this, think about pool failover can be proactive. We're going to have a known data center outage. Let's move over everybody to our backup pool before everything's down and while we can control things.
Sure, it's one of those, if you know you've got to take a data center outage, or you know you're going to be rebooting every server in a pool for a network change or a massive network outage, first step on that during your change window, invoke pool failover, failover everybody in a fairly controlled manner to their backup registrar and backup user services pool in the other location. Move your CMS, get everything taken care of, and now when you take things down, users won't notice then. They noticed when you planned on it rather than them calling you during your outage.
Exactly. So now we're going to look at this, and we're going to say, okay, and it tells pretty explicitly, hey, you can't do this because currently there's still an edge server and his next hop is this pool, and that would leave this edge server hanging. He doesn't have anywhere to go. Like, oh, oops. So what we can do is we can muck with topology, or better yet, just from a PowerShell, say, you know what, set the edge server. This edge server's identity is...
grow that? Can you make that a little bigger for
I
me?
always forget to do. No, not for you, but for everybody else, yes.
Oh,
but
for
not
the
you.
students, you'll do it.
Exactly. Okay, so I wonder if I do this, and then I do this. And then I do this again. We should see the exact same failure, but it should fit in the window, I'm hoping. Oh, although it doesn't change. Now everything fails. So we're seeing exactly that they can't physically get there because of our issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the CS Edge server. The Edge server is Edge 01, and his registrar is going to change from red pool to roam pool. So we're going to specify a new registrar. And when we do so, he goes and updates things. Now again, these things need to propagate. They need to get to where they need to go after we set this. However, we're not going to wait. So we're going to go ahead and invoke the CS pool again. And here we go. And now, because the edge is no longer associated to Redmond, it's now associated to Rome. When we do the check, it passes. Now again, the question came up with the hydration and how things are happening. You'll notice there's a bunch of commands that are happening, and technically you could do these commands somewhat of your own, but you don't. Just run the commands we're doing.
Exactly. It's running a bunch of get statuses and invoke hydration and invoke reanimation. Or there's a bunch of commands here.
Bring back from the dead,
exactly.
Stop services, start services.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's doing it all for you on your behalf. You just need to sit and look pretty and wait for it to happen. The other thing you'll notice is, as part of the process, when we fail over a pool, assuming we can talk to the pool, so this is in a force mode, we will be sending stop commands to all of the services and shutting them down on the remote pool. So people can't register. There's no way to even talk to that pool anymore, other than CLS, which is interesting. We keep that up because
we might want to log.
We might want to log, and that's where it would be. But everything else we're shutting down, and we're getting statuses of services. We're making sure that the statuses of the services are running on both front ends. Things are good to go, and then we're going to be shutting stuff down once we get back the information we're looking for. As we're doing this, because nothing's really happened yet, Holly is still where we expect her to be. And if we're lucky enough to catch this as things run, we will see red pool flip over and her log out and log back in. But this time, she won't be on red pool, she'll be on roam pool. So here we still are. Everything's still hunky-dory because we're still doing checks. If we look on here, nothing is configuration changed yet on FER1 or the pool, because all we're doing is get status information. We're not doing anything yet. We're just pulling back data. And if we look here, ooh.
Did you forget to reboot something?
No. SQL 3, he's having problems talking. Oh, and then we have a data received, so maybe it'll transfer now. Yeah. Again, he's waiting for stuff to happen. He's doing checks. He's kicking off replications to make sure things are happening. And we will see where this goes. We do not have database mirroring involved. We don't have anything of that awesomeness designed and put up into the scenario. So the only thing that's configured in this configuration is exactly what we were before in the HA world, but adding on the advantage. Now, you can see here we're waiting for replication status to happen for red pool, and we're saying, we couldn't get it. We don't know if you're ready to go. Do you want to keep going? You could say yes, and if you know the state of your environment, or if it pulls down, that's normal. If we say no, so let's go look at FEO2. Oh, and he's happy he's not tied up. That's good. And look at his event viewer. And get-CS Windows service. Everything's running on him, so he should be working. But he's not. Let's go ahead, and like we said, the nice place to start is always at your event log. See what's happening on this guy. The backup service is running, FTA is running on him, master's running, so he should be all happy to go. And if we look at things, He very well may have been, and it could have just been a timing issue. Trunks are down. That's normal. Oh, and we have the FTA is running in active mode, so he should be happy and receiving data. We can get a status. So if we get the CS replication status,
management store replication
get-CS management replication store status, and we just want to look at up to date, and replica FQDN, and you only know that because you do it so much. We can look and say, well, okay, so everything is talking and everything is functioning good to go. So let's just go try it again. So we'll say no, and then we'll do it again. Again, as you can see, the system is doing everything it can to prevent itself from ending up in a state where we're unhappy.
Right. It doesn't want to fail you over. Since you're trying to be proactive and help your users here, it doesn't want to fail you over to a pool that it can't determine is in a healthy and up-to-date state.
And you see, it's all happy now and things are working. What changed? Nothing. But hey, that's labs and VMs for you. So you can see pool failover is complete. Ribbon pulls over. If I do client 3, oh, we actually just caught her logging out and logging back in. Unfortunately, we didn't see it live, but we can validate this by looking at her configuration, and you can see that while she's still connecting to SIP, that's what she got when she did her initial creation. Roam pool is where everything is pointed to. Roam pool, roam pool, roam pool. Right? You'll also notice she's using the Roam's web services because she's on the Roam pool. But you'll also notice stuff like her location profile didn't change. There's some things that are specific to a user's and a user's pool, like their dial plans. We want things to stay and remain so that when they dial, it's normal.
As long as you define those as user dial plans,
That's right?
This is a situation where we made a decision that Holly's dialing patterns and behaviors shouldn't change based on where she lives. And it's a case where it's entirely possible that we lost the pool, but it's entirely possible that we've got WAN bandwidth such that Holly can continue to make phone calls exiting out of mediation servers or gateways in Redmond.
Right. And so as long as all of that is still, well, again, it goes back to design, and you've got to know what you're expecting things to happen in
exactly,
and testing and things to go. But the point here is Holly is on Roam. She is connected to the Roam pool.
Right.
And we know this to be true because it tells us so, but we also know this to be true because everything on this box has been shut down. If we look at the services on FEO1, and we could converse, or additionally on FEO2, we look at the Lync services, everything's shut down with
they're basically stopped. Yep.
And replica, because we need to know when we're back up online, so their replica keeps running. And everything else is being shut down or has been shut down. So, yeah, the front-end service isn't running. Registration's not going to happen. We can't talk to it to get on the box. He can't tell us that he can't talk to us because he can't talk.
It's not listening on 5061. Users can't register to this server.
Even if we wanted to, we wouldn't have the ability to. And the exact same thing happens on FEO2. If we look, everything's been shut down as well. So now we're in the state where we're saying, that was awesome. We failed over successfully. Everything worked. Now let's go ahead and move things back, right? So everything's up and happy. Users are registered. Red pools become inactive in the environment. And the server, everything knows he's in an active pool. That's what we wanted to do. When we come back to FEO1, we're going to do the exact opposite for the most part. The big thing that's different is the edge server, we can't flip it back. So it's the exact opposite order because he's not up yet. So we have to bring up the pool so we can move back the edge server's registration. And then again, if we want to move CMS, we can. So what we're going to do here is run the invoke command again. I don't know if it's here. Oh. There it is. And you'll notice the command is almost identical. There's two things that are different. One, we're saying pull fail back. There actually is a command, unlike the management server, that's just fail it. Because there is a process where the failback is restart services, redo things. We're not just moving stuff, we're actually reversing the process.
Right, we're not just moving database activity like we are with the CMS. In this case, we want to make sure that the user's data is pulled back, right? Because we want to make sure that those lazy writes finish. We don't want to necessarily fail you back to the now backup pool
Right.
and have you have lost data because you were sitting on the other pool for a little while.
Right. So we're going to invoke this back. We're going to specify red pool is what we're forcing back. It's of course going to ask us, are you sure you want to do this? And we'll go ahead and say, yep, that's what I want to do. And off it goes. Now, again, it's doing a lot of checks in the background, a lot of checks to make sure things are starting. It is the VM. It takes a little bit for things to start back up. But for things of, yeah, and there is no active backup service. I mean, so the application is validating that while I'm telling it to fail back, is it possible to fail it back? Is it in a failed state? If it's not in a failed state, I can't fail it back. So it's validating that things are in a method that they should be. And again, if we go to the event log and we look at stuff, we can see that the backup task is now assigned to this front end. Things are going to start happening again. But the backup service itself is starting. It's changed. It's changing. It's changing. Things are going to change. We're sure they're going to change. New ports are opening, and finally it starts the process up. And then we send a CMS replica. We have to get things letting all the other servers know, hey, things are changing, and we need things to work the way they want them to work. So then the backup service kicks itself up. It's going to tell it if it's inactive, it's active, what will apply, what won't apply. And if we go back to our world, come on, timing, there we go. It's going to start to get stuff and get things going. So again, fabric is changing. Now we talked a little bit about the fabric, and we will see that the fabric owns and sets new things. The voter set, and it tells you who is the voter set here, is FE01, FE02, and notice SQL01, again, we only have 2 front ends, so our third person, the tiebreaker, is actually our SQL server. It's a voter. And the added is all of them because they were all offline at the time. Right? If we continue to look at stuff, we can see the fabric came up. If the fabric doesn't come up, nothing comes up. So that's very important. If your fabric doesn't come up, something's wrong.
But the fabric should kind of come up.
It should come up as long as you didn't have, as long as the system's controlling things and you're doing things in a correct order.
But back to our discussion about high availability in 2 or 3 servers. When you're going from 2 to 3 servers, you in fact have to reset your fabric state.
That's right, because you are actually, in fact, one of the commands we have right here is the server startup is being delayed because the fabric hasn't figured out where people need to go. When you have 2 and then go to 3, it doesn't know what's going to happen. And so you have to say, okay, forget everything you know and start over and rebuild yourself and flush.
But when you go from 3 to 4, you don't have to do that same thing because it isn't having to redistribute all users across that same set. It's going to intelligently be able to bring a 4th node into that fabric and then balance it out a little over time.
Yep. So we see things coming up. We still see things still coming up. We have a bogus exchange error that doesn't have anything to do with us because we're not configured and or using it. We're still syncing. Things are still starting. If we come back to FE03, we see kind of like the opposite happening. File transfers happening the other way around. We see that where we are here, that pool failover is complete. Things are back. Redmond pool is coming back up online. So he knows about things that are going on just like the others. And if we go back and look at Holly on this side and refresh, ooh, look at that. We're in a state of network limiting issues. That's because we're not fully back up yet. Oh. And then that'll flip once we've actually finally flipped over back to FE01 and pool being in Redmond. So let's wait for services to start up. We'll see matchmaking started. So and that's the case where the client knows that it's supposed to be somewhere else. It's back. Its services aren't all the way up yet. And so we're like, well, you're in a failed state, but your user services aren't here because they're being moved back to Redmond. Therefore, we don't have everything for you in this new world, right? So we're waiting for things to happen. Ooh, and now pool fail back is complete from it. Whack doesn't happen because it's not there. It's going to perform a full sync, and things are going to have to come back. And if we look, there's the information about hydration. They're hydrating the various routing groups that have been created on the Redmond pool, so all the data can come back and things can become marked as active. Again, back to client 03. And hurry up and sign out, figure out that you can't do it. Or if you're an impatient person, you can go ahead and force it to happen by just simply logging out and logging back in. But you'll notice Redmond pool is now my new pool. And everything else is back to normal, or appears to be back to normal, if it would hurry up and check that its services are back up online, which as being as impatient as we are, we will force things to happen. Coming back to our pool on FE01, we can see response groups have been brought back up online. Everything's back up online. Everything's happy-go-lucky. And if we look at services, everything's back and running on this box, and which would be identical on FE02 as well. So we were able to take a user that was living on a pool that was, in this case, in Redmond. That's North America. We were able to then take that North America user, push them all the way to Europe into our own pool, and have full functionality for all intents and purposes for that user with minimal outage. And then when we were able to resolve the pool issues back in North America, we were able to automatically, by the use of a command, move the user back to their home server and pool. And again, now we can see Holly's back. All services are present. All information is present. And we still have the information saying, yes, we are on the Redmond pool. Everything worked. That was an awesome lab. It worked. So with that, we are going to flip over and show a little bit quickly on the
I just want to show you a little bit
side again.
Yeah, how SQL mirroring, how simple SQL mirroring is to get set up and working, and how not much you have to drop into SQL to actually do that work.
That's right. And so I told you this was a fun lab. There's a lot going on here. There's really two technologies with 3 different components we've been talking about. So there's HA, and just the server HA and the way it works from a single server member in a pool going down, and the user stays up, and services stay up. We also showed the DR side of things, where
Site
we've done
recovery.
The sites failed from one to another, or pool one to another. And again, you could do this a standard edition to standard edition. And I have had people ask, can't that be my HA solution? If that's what you consider HA, I suppose so, but that's not HA. That's no patching outage. That's not what it's designed to be.
No,
How's that?
Exactly. That is it's a within a site. Yeah, it is. It is. Single component failure in that 2 standard edition servers will have user impact.
That's right. And more so than that, you can't have both. So if you're going to have a site that has just 2 SE editions, standard edition servers, and you want an off-site replica of it, you can't. You can only be paired to one pool. So you've already made the pairing to get your HA.
Yep.
And now, not that we're talking about licensing, but standard edition's license, server license, and an enterprise edition server license, same cost. So
Yep.
there is a SQL cost, I get. But anyway, that aside, that's how it works. Now let's go ahead and look at database mirroring.
So what you can see here is that I've got my Lync server. I've got my red pool here. It's got a SQL server. I don't have any mirroring set up, and I'll show you that right now. If I edit the properties of this SQL server, or the properties of the database, you'll see that I can actually enable SQL Server mirroring straight here in Topology Builder, and this is where you would effectively make this change.
And manage the changes, right?
Yep. So I simply check a box to turn it on. If I've got additional SQL servers in my environment, I can simply select them. In my case, I don't, so I have to simply type SQL02.
It's important to know a mirrored SQL server can't be an active SQL server in the already being used within the topology.
Yeah.
It's going to block that.
Yep.
Even the same instance, if a different instance, it gets all funny about it. It
Sure.
doesn't want that.
No, but
that's not a mirror.
But I could have added a SQL server into my topology with no roles and no databases on it.
Just for the sake of adding it.
Making it so I don't have to type this new SQL Server store here.
Well, all right. And there's also a key there if you're on the management part. Yeah.
One thing to remember here is when I'm doing this, it's going to pop me up here and show me a mirror port that I need to use for this. Keep note of that, because the UI is going to actually make you enter that on the other SQL Server once this is added.
And if you don't, when you go to publish, it says you didn't do it.
Not only that, it'll have a big red X. It won't let you publish effectively. So in my case, I know it's 5020-5022, and I'm going to simply hit OK here. If I had a witness, I could specify the witness here. I don't have a witness, so I'm not going to worry about it. I simply hit OK, and you'll notice as soon as I do that, I get a red X here on the shared components, right? So I get that red X there on shared components. When I look at what that red X means, that red X is telling me, hey, I didn't tell SQL01 what its mirror port is.
Is there any reason you'd change this mirror port?
if you've got firewalls, if you need to deal with different firewall restrictions and your firewall guys say, hey, I don't like 5022, I don't like that default port, put it in the 80,000 range or wherever you're going to put it.
Right. It just has to be the same on both sides.
It has to be the same on both sides, and there has to be connectivity between the two servers.
Very important that they can talk.
So at this point, I've gotten rid of all my red X's, and I can simply add and simply publish my topology now. When I go to publish my topology, in fact, it's going to say, hey, I need a file share here. What's that file share used for, Brian?
File share is used for temporary data transfer where we're staging the data that stuff's going to. It just needs to be a share. Technically, it doesn't need to remain after this process, but it's nice to have a share that you can use for temporary storage for doing stuff like this when we're configuring things. So if it's not a problem, I'd leave it. If it is a problem by network security, you can remove it. But you'll need it for this process to happen. Otherwise, it will fail.
It's a Samba file share, an SMB file share where the SQL server that's active places temporary copies, and the SQL server that's going to be its mirror picks up those copies. Once everything's set up, it doesn't use SMB-based file transfer to get those copies anymore. So you'll see it's creating that mirror database on that server, and if I pop over here and look at that server, and look at the databases that are on that server, you'll see there it is. There's my RTC XDS database that's coming up. It's currently in recovery state because I'm copying data into it. That's the activity that's going on here. When it's creating that mirror database, the first thing it has to do is create those databases in a recovery state as a mirror and then push data into them.
Oh, look, there's things for us to do. Whatever might that be?
Because I need to make that work, I in fact have to restart all the Lync services on all these servers so that they know about that change.
That's right, and writes and things, and it's just what has to happen. Ideally, this is being set up when you're deploying initially so that it's not impacting users.
Yep.
Otherwise, you are going to have outages when you're doing these things.
Right, but if we look, I've now got that RTC XDS databases in my mirror and synchronized between those two servers, or between those two SQL servers. If I go ahead and sort of get the mirror state of that, you'll see that it's in mirror and synchronized for all these databases. Previously, when I ran that command, nothing worked. Nothing was there. The command would run,
but nothing would be returned.
But in fact, zero return, even if I typed the right command. And then there's this command here where I can invoke database failover. I don't want to invoke database failover until I restart my services.
You try, it would be bad.
Things won't work quite right. So at this point, I was just wanting to show you guys that's the complicatedness of it. Right? That's all there is to get this set up and working. That's the demo. That really is it. I was just wanting to show you guys. I've just made changes into this server such that I'm now keeping all of these databases in synchronization between these two SQL servers.
Automatically.
Automatically. I didn't have to do anything about that.
Yeah. And that's really the key, is that within Topology Builder, the Lync team has worked very difficultly and hardly and smartly to integrate both Lync commandlets as well as the Topology Builder to set things up, configure things for you, so that you don't have to be a SQL whiz-bang person in order to get these things configured. It's going to do it for you. And so that's the awesomeness. So, told you this was a cool demo. There was a lot of good stuff in it, and we hope you enjoyed it. We're going to take a 10-minute break and come back with our final session for the day.
Migration.
Migration. Something that typically is going to happen in every 2013 world unless you're greenfielding. So we'll see everybody back at 10 and see you then.
Thanks so much.